Hey everybody, welcome to the Relish This podcast. I'm Stu Swineford, co-founder of Relish Studio. We're a digital marketing agency committed to helping Colorado nonprofits thrive. Today we're talking with Anna Zawisza. Anna is the Chief Program Officer of Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado, which is a great Colorado-based organization that in its 36-year history has mobilized over 125,000 people to get outdoors and give back to Colorado's trail systems and wild places. Anna and I had a great conversation the other day, talking about how to increase diversity in their programs, how to increase retention, and generally how to leverage the VOC assets to bring people into the fold and get them engaged and motivated to help out. Here we go. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, again, thanks for being on. And I'll just kind of tee things up and just say, how are things going? We're here with Anna from VOC, Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado, and they're a great organization that I myself have done quite a bit of volunteer work with over the years. I've been on a couple overnight volunteer projects with them up above Treeline, and it's I can't say enough great things about the organization itself. So, Anna, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you got into the volunteer space, if that's always been your jam in terms of nonprofit work, or if you migrated to that kind of organically, like a lot of people do, and then hear a little bit more about VOC and take it from there.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I wish I had this story about intentionally going after a career path that included this, but the truth is, it was very much more of the latter, kind of falling into place, maybe. I think I put some of that energy out there, and it did happen. But I was way too pragmatic as a young person, so I didn't think you could actually work in the nonprofit world. And that's, I think, an element that I took from my upbringing with two very conservative and kind of business people. My stepdad was pushing me to be an engineer because that was a career, right? And so I got a business degree, and anyway, one thing led to another. I moved out to Colorado and really ended up in the nonprofit world. Was volunteering with VOC just as somebody who loves the outdoors. I came out to Colorado because of the outdoors, mainly because of skiing, but then fell in love with everything else, the trails and mountain biking and so on and so forth. And then a job came up at VOC, and it was as though it was kind of written for me. I'll give you an example. I think one of the requirements was 7 years of nonprofit program development experience. I had 7 years. I didn't have 6, awesome. I didn't have 8. I had 7. And so it just felt like when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my job. And I'm going to go for it. So here I am 5 years later.
That's really great. I love when the universe sort of comes together like that. I don't know if you've ever read a book called The Surrender Experiment, but it's by a guy named Michael Singer. It's one of my favorite books in a lot of ways. It has some mystical stuff, and there's some things about it, but basically what the gist of his theory is that if you just kind of surrender to things, just say yes to stuff, that all of this stuff just starts showing up like right when you need it. And he has multiple examples in his book where he needed $2,500 and someone walked in with $2,500, and he needed, this thing to happen. Like he needed to put together a land deal to merge these two pieces of land that he wanted to bring together. And like the person who owned one of those pieces of land is like, hey, do you want to buy this? Like just like weird stuff that just kind of happens. And it's really interesting when you pay attention that kind of holds true. It's fun to experience that. And certainly there's some confirmation bias there, but it's also pretty cool when you see it.
It is, and I really am a firm believer. I kind of call it, dancing with life, or kind of, being in flow, or whatever words you have for it. But when you stop kind of fighting and, like you said, surrender to, and I think that, you have a friendly universe. a universe that actually wants to be on your side, that's a really powerful way to go through life. And it's definitely been working for me over the last 10 years.
That's great. Love to hear that.
And I'd love to, I'm going to write down the name of the book, and definitely seek it out, because it sounds like something I'd like to read.
Well, I'll send you a link to it, at least after our recording here. And then I'll put it in the show notes. I'm trying to take some notes on things to add to the show notes. So I'll add that to it as well, just in case anyone else would like to read that.
Great.
So tell me a little bit about VOC. Let's start kind of with the mission and what you guys are hoping to do, and then we could talk about goals a little bit, and then maybe try and tease out some gold here to see how we can help move you toward those goals.
Yeah. So this is my favorite subject on the planet, because I really firmly believe in VOC and its mission, which is to motivate and enable people to be active stewards of Colorado's natural resources. And we're about the people. Yes, we're about the natural resource, but we want to bring people into kind of a connection and building a long-term connection of caring, right? So, and when we say natural resources, we really mean that. It's not just the land, it's water, it's air, it's all the things that, we need as human beings to live and to thrive. So we've been doing it for 36 years. We kind of know at this point some of the things that work, but we're also, I think, always looking to improve. We also are coming in 2020 with a bigger sense of humility around especially kind of diversity, equity, inclusion issues, and how little we've really been able to accomplish in that realm. And so, using the George Floyd moment in a way to kind of say, you know what, we've got some work to do here that we haven't done effectively in 36 years. And what does that look like? So some of the goals, and I know we're going to get into that, but they really are about a different type of volunteer, different type of volunteer leader. But really the work is active, the work is challenging. Anytime that you're doing manual labor for multiple hours, even if it's yard work in your own home, you're going to feel it. Especially as you get older, you're going to feel it in your back, you're going to feel it in your muscles. But I think it's also empowering to say, you know what, I made a sweat and muscle investment in something I really care about. And so many of us here in Colorado actually really care about our public lands, our waterways, our forests. And so feeling like we at least have some ability to positively affect those things is great. So I always say, talking about VOC in Colorado is like, I don't know, selling apple pie on the 4th of July. Like, it's just people love it, and people want to get involved.
Well, that's great. I mean, certainly I heard those changes in the way you guys talk about projects, when we met last week on our project. And so it's really cool to hear that language start to flow in. I know that there are a lot of challenges with the outdoor industry and inclusion, and so it's great to see and hear VOC's approach to that. So thank you for including that. I think it's really important. So over 36 years, do you know the stats on how many volunteers you've worked with over that period of time and those things?
Oh, yeah.
Can you share those with us, or is that
sure
secret information?
No. So not counting this season, we've had 125,000 people come out with.
Oh, that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? I know. And, our donated labor value to the state of Colorado is just around $25 million.
Per year, or since
since inception? I wish per year. No, per year it's about $1 million. It used to be. This year is a little different, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
But typically, the last few seasons, it's been about $1 million a year.
Okay. And where are you hoping to take that? What are the KPIs that you guys are trying to improve upon? For the remainder of this year, 2021. And maybe we should talk about quote unquote normal. I don't know how normal we'll get to again. But I think that things will get back to some sort of normalcy. What does that look like, and what are you guys trying to hit in a normal year?
So we definitely have some, like you said, KPIs that we track. So big picture wise, okay, what we know from lots of different coalitions and work that's been done, not by VOC, is that between 70 and 90% of Coloradans recreate regularly in the outdoors. That's huge. I mean, think about that. You know, people, and that might be, you know, taking their dog around a local park, or it might be bagging a 14er and kind of everything in between.
Sure.
The people who come out to volunteer with us and other groups like us statewide, we haven't done an analysis since 2014, but the last time we did, so not that long ago, right? 6 years, less than 1%.
So of the 70 to 90% that recreate, less than 1% commit themselves to at least one volunteer for Outdoor Colorado project per year, or any volunteer, any outdoor related. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a huge gap.
Well, that's a lot of opportunity.
I love how you think, Stu. Yeah, sure. Opportunity. I think awareness. I still think people think there is an old model, which used to be around, but it's been probably, you know, a good 20 years, where, oh, well, the Forest Service hires seasonal crews and they go in and do all that work. That's not the case anymore. 50% of the U.S. Forest Service budget goes to wildfire suppression now. They simply don't have the money. Now, granted, recently we did get the Great American Outdoors Act passed, which will change that. Yay, go Congress.
Yay.
I applaud them for that. But still, you know, it's not gonna take care of all the backlog maintenance. And so the education and awareness piece for Coloradans, especially ones who go outside, is, hey, you know what? You go out there, you play for free, pretty much, except if you're going maybe to a state park. You don't need a license to recreate. You know what? Give back. Give one weekend, give one day a year, and it doesn't have to be VOC. You have probably a local stewardship organization in your neck of the woods. We're statewide. We'll happily take your labor as well, but get involved, give back, take care of the resources you're using.
Right. Well, I know you guys are a 1% for the Planet partner, as are we. And I think that one of the things I love about that organization is it's not just about money. There are dozens of ways that you can give 1%, and whether that's volunteer time or donations or you know, whatever. You know, the 1% is a number that I think people can wrap their arms around. It's interesting that that's also the number that is less than 1% of the people give back in this way. And so, you know, trying to just get, you know, and if you gave one day, and obviously that's not even 24 hours. So I know your shifts are 8 to 4 usually, right? So that's 8 hours in a year is significantly less. That's like a 16th of a percent or something like that. So that sounds like an interesting message to be able to put out there and see how we can get that to resonate.
Yeah, and you know, I think you mentioned a really good point there too. It doesn't have to be swinging a tool, right? So first of all, there's multiple ways to volunteer. If you love to take photos, come and take some photos. If you love to write a blog, come and talk to the volunteers who are out there and write a blog. If you love to cook, become one of our crew chefs and food. Again, in a non-COVID year, right now we're not.
Right.
But you know, there's so many different ways. If you love to organize events and parties and things like that, we can use your help. Stuffing envelopes. I mean, you name it, we can probably use your labor. And then if you just don't have the time because you have, you know, 2 jobs or a family that's really demanding of your time, you can make a donation. And it doesn't have to be, again, to VOC. It could be a donation to another nonprofit group. It could be, you know, the National Forest Foundation, whatever. There's ways for you to pay for the use that and the joy that you get from Colorado's resources.
I love it. So going back to kind of where you're hoping to move the needle is your chief, I mean, most nonprofits have multiple challenges and multiple goals that they're trying to reach: donations, activity, volunteer time, etc. Where do you find consistently the biggest gaps in where you're hoping to be and where you currently reside?
That's a fun question that I could talk about for the next 3 hours probably. But I think there's certain things from the programmatic perspective that we definitely want to do. So I mentioned before diversity, equity, inclusion. So one of those things that we really want to do is diversify the makeup of our staff, board, and volunteer and program participants. We have typically kind of served the middle income, white, college educated person. That's not to say that's been across the board always, and we've done some interesting things to change that. But, we want people to come out with us in a way that works for them and get engaged in kind of that hands-on making their community, our community better. So, so that's a huge goal for us. And, we look at kind of diversity from a very broad perspective. Yes, absolutely, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, but also, age and, kind of experience, kind of ways of knowing, not just ways of being.
Right.
And then sexual orientation, religious affiliation, veteran status, or military. When we kind of talk about engaging people, we want all Coloradans, but especially those who actually, use parks, trails, and open spaces, which again is a big subset of Colorado's population, to get engaged. So that's a huge piece. Another really big piece for us is retention. So we were just out on a project last week. It was an 8-hour project, but with travel time, most volunteers put in probably about 11 hours.
Yeah.
It's a long day, and you're working and you're active and you're in the outdoors, sometimes at elevation, in the heat. It's hard. It's hard work. And, I say that because I think being open about it is really important. But it's not for everybody to volunteer in that way. And so, we have about a 30% retention.
Okay.
We really want to get that to much higher. I would say at least 50% of our volunteers, we would like them to be returning year over year.
Okay. As volunteers or just in any sort of capacity?
Well, sure, in any capacity, but I think if we got them to volunteer, they're a customer, we want to retain them as a customer. If we got them to donate, we want to retain them as a donor. It's a little bit of a different strategy on the retention side. Yes, there's crossover. There's lots of crossover. Most of our returning volunteers actually are donors.
Right.
But it's much harder to get a new volunteer or a new donor than it is to retain current.
Yep. Yeah, we say that a lot in our business. It's easier to sell again to someone you've sold to once than to try and create a whole new client. That's that acquisition cost component of things. And so once people are in your circle, it's that's the well that we start to ask questions about, like how many people are on your email list, how many active volunteers do you have in any given year, and what are you doing to get back in front of that crew. So I think let's stop there for just a second and talk through a couple of ideas that I might have for you. How I know I see you guys pop up on LinkedIn quite a bit, but I'm playing in that space quite a bit as well. So So there's certainly some social media places that I'm just not very active in, and so you guys may be more active. But tell me a little bit about your outreach and the activities that you're doing on a regular basis, and then we can kind of chat through how frequently you're posting in those areas. Where are you guys most active right now?
So our best platform is Facebook, and it is the platform that we use for kind of all of our photographs, albums from projects. So we'll cross-post some things, but so we have about 13,000 followers on Facebook, where Instagram is probably hovering around 1,500, Twitter about the same, and then LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel. We don't really use it all that much, except once in a while if we have some content that's, a video content. So, I know Facebook demographics are not necessarily exactly where we want to be. And so we're trying to grow our Instagram presence, more of the younger millennial population and younger. And then LinkedIn, funny enough, once in a while really surprises us because we'll post something and all of a sudden we have kind of the best engagement of any of our platforms. And we kind of go, I wonder what that was all about. Right. So those are our social media platforms that are the ones that we're using the most. And then we have an electronic newsletter that goes out to about 36,000 emails. During the project season, it's twice a month. And then in the off season, so November, December, January, February, it's just once a month. And that's really our main kind of engagement opportunity for people. It's where we post projects that aren't filled. It's where we highlight other non-project, because most people see us for the projects we do. There's a lot of other stuff that we do, and we're really trying to educate the people who have engaged with us. But obviously, they've had to come in and say, yes, I want to be on your newsletter.
Okay. And then does everyone pretty much get the same newsletter? Are you segmenting that list at all? Are you like, is there a volunteer segment, a recent volunteer segment, a certain type of project? Are you doing anything to segment that list, or is it just the kind of one and done? Here's the newsletter, and away we go.
So with that newsletter, we're not, but we do targeted email blasts. So for example, if people have told us and have volunteered on a high alpine project that's rated difficult, and we're having trouble filling that project, we'll do a targeted email blast to those people and say, hey, we've got this opportunity. You're interested in this kind of thing. We also have some other newsletters that are targeted at different populations. The Voice newsletter, which is our main kind of big newsletter, we don't segment. Maybe we should, but we don't.
Well, there's an idea for you. One of the other things that we're finding a little bit, and it's not universal. None of the things I'm going to recommend work all the time, but certainly some trends that we're seeing are that people are getting a little burned out on the, here are the 9 things that we want to talk to you about this month newsletters. And so we've been really changing at least part of the tactic to be just focus on one thing and push a newsletter that's just about a single thing. So again, that stops being a newsletter, I guess, but an email outreach. But really just have it be about one project that you want to highlight, or one volunteer, or one ask, as opposed to having people try and select the piece of that newsletter that you hope resonates with them. Just know that that of the 36,000. Some percentage aren't going to be interested in that one thing, but some percentage are going to be really interested in that one thing, and you haven't buried it amongst 9 other things. So that's something to think about as an email tactic.
Yeah, and I read that in your recent Relish. I don't know what you call it, but you do an email, right?
Yeah, my marketing insights thing.
Yeah, and I read that, and I thought a little bit about it. Here's kind of what. Well, a couple things, and maybe we can riff on this a little bit, but nonprofit, we're always limited in time and resources. So right now, even getting this regular newsletter out every 2 weeks, a lot of time for somebody to put all that content together and get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I feel like we have lots of things we talk about always, right?
Yep.
So how many times can you hit someone in their inbox before they go, oh my gosh, you guys are bombarding me with information.
Right.
So those are just two things
Right.
that come to mind about that strategy versus let's lump it together. People can scroll, they can read a headline. If it doesn't appeal to them, they don't actually read it and move on.
Right. Right. Definitely worth considering. One of the things that you might try is, again, creating a segment of the list, and then you have a big list, so you have 36,000 people. If you took even 1,000 of those people randomly selected and just started a weekly single issue mailer to them, and then you can see if you get grumpiness about that, and part of that could actually be telling them what you're doing, and just say, hey, how often would you like to receive correspondence from us? And that way, at least you're kind of surveying them as well, and getting that feedback. So, I wouldn't throw your entire email list into this experiment, but coming up with a way to just test the waters a little bit, I think is valuable. The other thing that you could do is do an A/B test on one of your sends, and have half the list get the regular newsletter and half the list get a single issue, and see how the engagement on each of those plays out.
Yeah.
And just test it. So those are a couple of email things that you might consider.
Yeah.
In terms of your social, do you feel like it's a one-way conversation, or are you guys really active on back and forths and going out and chatting up new people? I know, again, limited resources. I'm just trying to tease out some opportunities here.
I think for our just kind of general posts, it's mostly, kind of a like or a share. It's not necessarily as much comments or questions where people engage.
Okay.
But if they do, we make it a point to always respond.
Okay, great. That's a good policy.
Yeah. And, once in a while we have what we call our snarky comment,
sure,
where we're just like, really? And we still respond to them because we want people to know, like, hey, we heard you.
Yep.
Where we've actually had some fun was at the start of the COVID thing. We were really trying to figure out how do we keep people kind of engaged, hopeful, and we created a Facebook group.
Okay.
And anyone's welcome. You don't actually have to have volunteered with us. If you join the group, you can join the group. And let me tell you, our people were posting in there because they missed the community.
Yep.
And it was awesome. It was awesome to see, like, they were pulling out old photos and little stories and anecdotes from 20 years ago from a project. And it was, or like they were doing household repairs and they were posting them, and they were like, working in my yard because I can't be on a VOC phone.
That's great.
So really, really had a great time with that, and want to continue that kind of organic engagement from folks. Really through the group, I think, is the best way to do that.
Yeah. So I think people tend to think of unfortunately, I think a lot of businesses and foundations and organizations tend to look at social media as like a place to post stuff. So it becomes like a one-way street. And from the onset, social media is social, and it is a conversational piece. And so I think it might be interesting for you to just put as a KPI, engage with X number of people per week. And if that's responding to people who have engaged with you, then you can count that. And if it let's say that number's 20, right? So you just want to get some sort of conversation or some sort of you guys going out and asking for information or engaging with at least 20 people a week. And that'll give you the opportunity to kind of target some of these influencers. I'm a lot more active on Instagram, And one of the things that I purposely started doing was following a lot of BIPOC outdoor people, and there are a lot of groups out there. There are a lot of really cool things going on in the Latinx community, in the Black outdoors people community. There are a lot of really cool people to follow, and so just setting a goal of go follow however many people, and then post something on their account every once in a while. I think particularly as we talked about diversity a little while ago, that's a built-in kind of audience, and so I think that you might be able to see some advantages there. I know Big City Mountaineers is active in Denver, and there are several kind of Denver area organizations as well. The crew at Conservation Colorado, they've done a really good job at their events of bringing in Native American communities and minority groups into their events. And so if you need, I know those guys too. So, but if you needed an introduction into them to just get some names, I think that'd be a really great way to just kind of start that diversity engagement. And the other thing that I've found, so this is something that I had been doing on LinkedIn, is just going in and liking a bunch of things. So it's like, if you post something that I think is neat, I'd be like, oh, like, or, congratulations or heart, and not actually posting something. And one of the things that I've actually noticed is really helping in that business community, in that B2B space. And I know that it works across all the social media platforms, is taking the time to actually post a comment. Mm-hmm. It creates a lot more visibility. It demonstrates that it's not just an easy ding. I hit the heart and away we go, but like that you're actually engaged and you actually care, and it goes a long way. And I think in some of the social media places, it actually gets you in front of their followership a little bit more regularly. And it also gives them an opportunity to, no one's going to say, hey, thanks for the like.
Right.
Not no one, but most people don't say thanks for the, that effortless thing that you just did. But if you post like, hey, I really like that picture of you, blah, 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 they'll be like, oh, thanks for the comment. That was neat. And so it creates an opportunity for back and forth and relationship building. And, I'm not the first, I didn't come up with this, but, relationships are interactions over time. And so even those little back and forths, those become those building blocks on which all of a sudden people are like, well, I know these guys. They comment on my posts all the time.
Yeah. And so, I do that personally with my Facebook rather than a like or a, emoji. But a comment, if I really want somebody to know, like, I read the thing that you put up there, or, congratulations, or whatever it might be. So here's a question though. Do you do that as Relish, or do you do that as Stu?
On LinkedIn, I'm mostly active as me.
Okay.
And I'm certainly, as me, I'm a representative of Relish on LinkedIn. If you follow me on Instagram, you're going to see a little bit different approach to that stuff. But on LinkedIn, I feel like LinkedIn is a business area. So, I keep it very businessy there. Mm-hmm. But I've been very intentional about growing my personal LinkedIn breadth, I guess, or reach. And so that, and the other philosophy that we kind of have is, people do business with other people. And yes, there's certainly brands that have, transcended that, where it's like, I love Patagonia, right? Like, that's a brand. I'm not doing business with Yvonne. I'm doing business with Patagonia. But at the end of the day, it's people behind that. And so being, I just try to be super authentic and vulnerable, and me, I'm me. Sure. Maybe cursing a little less than I normally do on LinkedIn, but definitely, just approaching it from that perspective and trying to build relationships is how I've been doing it. I think for you guys, you have a bigger brand than Relish does. So I think being active and looking at your follower count. So you have connections, and that's usually a personal, and then you have people following you. So people tend to follow brands and connect with other people. So coming at it from the perspective of how do you build both of those, and if your brand is big enough and you have enough followers, then I would probably be a little bit active on both. But you as kind of the brand ambassador or one of the brand ambassadors to for Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado on LinkedIn, I think that it could work really well for you to look at your connections count and see how you can bring that up.
Yeah. No, I probably need to get personally more active on LinkedIn. In fact, social media is one of those things I have come to loathe in some ways. So I really am trying to limit most of my time, and I'm just trying to live a real life instead of an online life.
Yep.
At the same time, I do, especially with LinkedIn, when I do post, it's mostly about something that's going on with VOC. So today I posted about, our art auction that's continuing through Sunday, in the hopes that, even a few people could look at some art and say, wow, I'd like to bid on that.
Right.
So I think my network's over 500 people right now.
Oh, that's great.
So, and LinkedIn for me is a very different strategy than Facebook. Facebook is people I know. LinkedIn is, if somebody wants to connect with me, I'm connecting with them. So bring it on.
Right. So LinkedIn groups would be another place that you might consider adding a Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado group. It tends to get a little solicitous, at least from what I have seen, and people aren't quite as active on groups as they once were. It doesn't feel like there's some big groups that have a lot of activity. But for example, there's a 1% for the Planet group, and when I pop into that, it tends to feel a little solicitous, where people are just kind of posting like, hey, I have a digital marketing agency and you should use me. And it's like, well, that's maybe not the way that I would approach that. But if you have this kind of, clearly a fairly rabid fan base, right, for Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado, it might be worth kind of testing the waters there and seeing what you can get. That might be an option. I think that my biggest recommendation is think about who your target audiences are and where they might go to get information. And this is another opportunity to maybe survey your list, and just say, hey, where do you go to get information about X, Y, and Z? And I actually have a framework for that I'll see if I can share with you, where even on your site, it gives you the opportunity to kind of do a survey before, as people kind of come in, you can say, where do you get information, and leverage the power of this thing that people want, which is to be a part of this volunteer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And just ask one more question, like, where do you play?
Right.
And because people are jazzed, they're not going to bail because of that. They're in your funnel, and they're very excited to be part of what you're doing. So just ask one more question, like, where do you prefer to get information when you go out to get information? They have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever all the latest things are, and you'll get a feel for where you should be playing and where you should put your time.
So do you feel like that should be more about social media, or should that also be, there's, for example, there's that newsletter Out There Colorado, right?
Yep.
And it's a lot of outdoors news. It's a lot of death and dying, which I'm always kind of like, okay.
Right.
But regardless, it's something that gives outdoor enthusiasts an ability to kind of know what's going on, feel like, they have an in.
Right.
So would you recommend asking people about like certain platforms like that in addition to social media, or would you want to just keep it where we could actually then have a real presence?
Well, I know you guys asked the question, how did you find out about us, or how did you hear about this project?
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I think I would change the question from time to time. I would try it out, and we're getting a little bit towards the end of the season here,
Yeah.
so obviously these might be things that we need to implement next year. But I know that you guys have access to Civicor and can customize that kind of in any way that you want. So it might be worth just adding a question about just, hey, where do you go to get information and about outdoor activities, for example, or volunteer opportunities, or you can phrase that in a variety of different ways, and then just give them as many options as you want. My guess is that one of the social media places is probably going to fall out in terms of like, oh, everyone's 70% of the people use Facebook, and you can make it a multi-select list too if you want. So you could give them the opportunity to say, I get my information on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, or whatever. But at that point, at least you'll have, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you should abandon something, but at least you'll know where to start putting more of those eggs in terms of your baskets, right?
But it's only getting us the people who are actually volunteering with us, right? Because it's
right.
in the project, it's either in the project registration, or maybe we do a post-project survey where we have that question. So,
well, or you could set up a survey that you send out to your email list. Mm-hmm. So those are people that are active and not active.
Yeah.
And you could send it out to that list. I mean, the likelihood that you're going to get a ton of people filling that out is lower than if you put it in the stream of this checkout process, essentially. Yeah. But and I wouldn't necessarily make it mandatory, but I think you'll get information from that current place, and any data is better than no data. Sure. So
yeah,
are better.
Going back to that gap of the people who play versus the people who volunteer.
Yes.
That's where I want to understand where are those people, the people who aren't yet coming out with any stewardship group.
Right. So it's probably the similar demographic, right? So the volunteers are coming out of that bigger pool.
They are.
And so that's why I'm trying to leverage the assets that you can get to without having to pay for it, because you already own, quote unquote, own that list, right? And so you have access to that group of people. And I think you can make, certainly there's some assumptions, but I think you can make some assumptions that these are very similar user types, personas, as the population as a whole. Obviously, they're different because these people have taken the initiative to hop out and say, I'm going to give my time to this great thing. But from a fundamental standpoint, they're probably not that much different than that 99% of the population that isn't volunteering currently. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, and I would put, so it might be worth running a Facebook campaign for a little while, and have that be. So how we tend to do that is we start really broad, and you come up with an advertisement, which might be surveying people on some question. And, so the goal here is just to get information and some engagement, and there's some brand awareness as well, right? But it's not like to transition somebody into a volunteer. The idea here is to just get some data. And what we like to do is create an ad that isn't perfect. It's good enough. So you're not spending a bunch of money and time like going back and forth on what this ad looks like or how it works. And then you use really broad targeting. So don't get super specific about your targeting, but just be really broad, because that tends to loosen your, well, it does a couple things. One, it does expand that audience dramatically. And two, it reduces your cost per ad, or cost per click, or however you set up that campaign. And then you'll find that from that, you can analyze that data and you can see what segment of that broad group actually engaged with that. And so then you know that that group is actually interested in this type of ad. And so you can go after that group a little more aggressively with something where you're willing to spend a little more on that kind of group, and then do it again. And so basically then come up with another ad that you run again, get it good enough and run it to a good enough segment that you're not spending a ton. And you just start to see where people fall out of that or fall into your, what you're trying to do. And then you can really target on that user type.
Yeah.
With a more specific, with more specificity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely some food for thought.
Yeah. Those are all interesting things. So in terms of retention, you're at 30% and you want to get to 50. So I know you said that you do some marketing or some outreach and segmentation around people that have a specific project type that they've worked on. And when opportunities arise in that, are there any other ways? So for example, if somebody worked on a high altitude, are you only sending them high altitude or high elevation projects?
No, and it's not often that we actually have to deploy that strategy to do a targeted email blast, because a lot of times our projects are filling without that. Mm-hmm. It's our problem children, and we always have a couple during the season where we're creatively thinking, okay, these people were on a similar project last year. We're highlighting it in our communications. We're posting it on social media. We're looking with partners to help fill that project. So, we did do some research about kind of what prevents people from coming back out. And mm-hmm. Our research led us to a couple of conclusions. One is that most of the time, at least what people are telling us, is that something in their life changed. They moved. They got a new job where they're working weekends or nights. They had a baby. Got sick.
Right.
So something is preventing them from coming out.
Okay.
I think there's more to that story than just a lifestyle change. These were the people who responded to our surveys, and then finally we did some phone calls because we really wanted to.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Put some time into it, but my sense is that there's something else that might be a barrier. And one of the things I came to is, just really knowing that I consider myself a person who's in pretty good physical shape, and I am tired. I am tired of the VOC project. Now, granted, I always pick the difficult ones, so that's self-punishment. But my sense is that if we can offer more of a shorter duration project, so that you're committing to 4 hours, you're coming out there, yes, you're working hard, but you're not needing 10 hours of sleep or 12 hours of sleep after. Your muscles aren't super sore. So that's like one potential strategy. Another one is, how do we continue to build community on projects? How do we get people to really, and again, COVID has turned some of these strategies upside down. But how can you create an experience for people beyond the volunteer experience? So, a guitar player at the campfire at night, or, a cornhole tournament, or some kind of educational opportunity on the project, which are all things we do. We just don't always do them consistently because of, lack of resources and things like that. So there was how do we eliminate some barriers to coming back? How do we create an experience? And then, how do we get people to get to know each other and get to be buddies and friends on these projects, so that they do look at VOC as a community.
Right.
And they want to come and see their friends on a weekend. So those are kind of the main things that we considered. But again, would love to hear from you whether you have some other suggestions for us for retention.
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas. And the first one is So it sounds like so for example, if I volunteered last year on a project, and there's a similar project that you're needing some legs and hands and all the rest of our parts on those projects this year, that you're sending me a very specific, like, hey, we have a project in Wash Park next week, or in a couple months, and there's some spots. Would you be do you want to sign up for that? Is that kind of the ask?
Sometimes. Now,
Okay.
we do have one other strategy that I didn't tell you about, which is about halfway through the season, if somebody hasn't come back out, we send them an email and says, hey, we haven't seen you out yet this year. We'd love for you to engage.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so I have a couple of ideas. So the first one is something that I've been trying, which is small asks. So instead of assuming that someone wants something and just going ahead and sending it to them, I say, hey, for you, maybe it's, hey, we have some volunteer openings available. Would you be interested in learning more about them? So instead of just sending them the list, ask them permission to send the list. Because when people opt in, they feel more like connected, and they feel like they took the initiative as opposed to the initiative was kind of pushed on them. So that might be something to try. The other thing that I loved, and this was something that you did to me this year, was there was a personal ask from you to join this project. And what I'm wondering is if there might not be an opportunity to leverage the community. So I know Scott was on our project last week, and Scott was on I believe the Mount Evans project that I was on a couple seasons ago. So have Scott send me an email. So Scott signed up. Have Scott be the person who asks me, hey, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. We were on a project last year. There's one coming up that I'm on. Would you like to join? And so it becomes a personal ask. Also leveraging all of the crew members. My guess is that volunteers really get kind of attached to the crew members, because that's like maybe aspirational for them, or they're really impressed with the fact that I think it was Martin had 45 projects under his belt and Mark had 50 under his belt last week, right? Mm-hmm. So have the crew chiefs that are working on these projects be the spokesperson for this ask. And you can automate this a bit. But if it's somebody I've worked with in the past, I'm probably going to be more inclined to open that email and more inclined to consider that as like wow, this dude reached out to me. Like, even if I know in the back of my mind that Mark didn't really reach out to me, it's, this thing that just gets generated. At least there's the thought behind that. And there's this other connection that comes into play. So just kind of leveraging those, I think, would be pretty powerful, and maybe worth a try. The life change thing, I mean, you gave a lot of really good reasons why someone might not be able to come back out. These are still they're still evangelists for VOC. I mean, they took the time to do an 8-hour project or a 4-hour project, and so maybe asking them to recommend a friend and creating the ability for them to say, hey, if things have changed and you're no longer able to do this, do you know anyone who might be interested? And if so, either please forward their name to us or send this on to them. And then all of a sudden this thing is coming from a friend. So it's not coming from this organization. There's a personal connection kind of created there. So that's a couple things.
Yeah, that last one I think is great for new volunteers. But I liked your others about the retention, because you are right. If I got an email from someone I worked with on a project who, obviously there was some larger interaction than just we were on the project together. We may never have actually talked. But if you know that there was, we were on the same crew and we worked side by side for 2 days and we were kind of buddy on that project, getting a personal email from that person to say, hey, I'm coming back out next week and we still have some spots. Would you? My goodness, absolutely. Yeah. That is a much more kind of personal and like an appeal that I would consider rather than VOC just sending me hey, we got project slots open on this project.
Right. Right. And I think that even if I don't remember that person, even if I didn't really interact with them, just it's like on LinkedIn, right? When there's all these things, it's like, oh, well, we went to the same school, or we live in the same town, or we like the same things, or we're in the same groups. Like those become these warming up mechanisms by which there's an authenticity to to that interaction.
Yeah.
So even if it's lukewarm, that's better than cold or freezing. So even if it's it's a little bit distant, like, hey, we were on this project together, and I thought I'd reach out and see if you'd be interested in joining me on this next one. Yeah. That's a warmish lead. A burning hot lead would be someone that I actually interacted with, so like a crew chief or someone that you somehow know that I had very close interaction with. That would be burning hot, but certainly, I think any warming up that you can do is going to be a viable way to move that needle.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. You're right. There's an affinity built just from the fact that we were on this project together. It doesn't matter what happened on that. Well, unless you were a jerk to me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
You know what? I'll be honest. We don't have many of those, simply because I think the people who go out to do this kind of work are just really awesome people, and so typically we're all just having a great time out there and working hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience. Well, so we're almost to an hour. That was super fun. I had a really great time talking with you. What were your takeaways from our conversation, do you think? Or what one takeaway did you like?
My takeaway is that we're bringing back a furloughed person who will relieve our marketing person, who Ellie. Okay. And I can't wait to share these ideas with her once our other furloughed staff is back and she has a little bit of space. Right. But this comes at a great time for us because we are kind of, the calendar year is our planning year and it's our fiscal year. And so we're getting to the end of this season and starting to look forward into 2021. And I think some of these things are fantastic ideas for us to implement.
Well, I had a super fun time talking with you. There's one other question I have for you. And I want to end all of these podcasts with some sort of action that people can take. And so I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but what would you want people who listen to this to do if they were to do one thing, for the planet or for themselves or for VOC or for whomever?
So thanks for asking. I would actually love for every one of us to commit never to walk by a piece of trash again. All
right. I'll put that in the show notes. Pick up trash.
Just don't walk by it. Pick it up. Have have the equipment you need, as a glove or something, but pick it up. If we all did that, I think we'd live in a much nicer area. Well,
I agree, and I don't know how active you are on Instagram, but there's an account called Poop Bag Fairy. Ooh. Who takes pictures or posts pictures of that people send of poop bags that people have left all along the trails, and so that might be one for you guys to engage with.
We actually have. So just one last thing: you can take any old container, your old mayonnaise container, an old Nalgene bottle, and turn it into what we call a crapsule.
Nice.
You can pick up other people's left on the trail poo bags, and if you have a dog, you can put your own dog's poop in there. Make sure the opening's appropriate for the size of dog you have. Right. But that way you can carry it in your pack. It's not gross. It doesn't smell.
That's awesome. I love that idea, and that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on. That was super fun, and I'll let you know when this posts, and I hope you have a really great day.
Thanks, Stu. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us last week. You're an animal, and
well,
I really appreciate your muscles. And
No problem. And as always, if you or Kelly need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions, or if you have some big idea you want to run by me, I'm here to help you guys out. So give me a shout.
Awesome. Congrats on getting this thing going.
Oh, thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This, the nonprofit marketing podcast. If you want to continue the conversation, see how we can unearth some gold for your organization, go to relishstudio.com/podcast to sign up to be a guest on the show. And that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Relish This, the nonprofit marketing podcast.